The fashion was the third most polluting industry on the planet. So if you kind of tell people not to do things, then it doesn't really resonate. The problem with fashion is overproduction. Like, we are producing more and more and more clothes and consuming more and more and more of them. So overstuffed wardrobe, right? Full of clothes. Like, far too many clothes. You don't wear them all. Yeah. We only wear like 25 to 30% of our wardrobe. But if you've ever taken a pair of shoes to the menders and had them re-heeled and redone, and you're just thrilled when you get them back again, aren't you? You're like, oh my gosh, they're like new. If I need a new jumper, am I going to get more pleasure out of, buying something cheap and new, or mending the thing that I've already got and really taking care of it and making it like new again? 1.5 warming is that we have to limit global warming to within 1.5 degrees of pre-industrial levels. We now understand that global warming is happening, and we understand that it is human caused. So the things that we are doing as a human race is causing the planet to heat up.
When I think of sustainability, I just think people get scared of it. Impending doom of like, what we're going to do? It's coming and I don't know how to stop it. Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Tiffanie with us. Tiffanie, just quickly want to introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself.
Oh, thanks, Charlie. I am Tiffanie Darke. I am a fashion and sustainability activist, you could call it. I write. I am a shopkeeper. I've got books, What Not to Wear and Why. I've got a Substack, It's Not Sustainable. And I am the founder of the Rule of 5 campaign, which recommends that we only buy 5 new items of clothing a year.
I am so looking forward to this conversation because there's so many topics that are very front of mind at the moment, which you're very much involved in. So I'm looking forward to diving into a bit more. But to start off, I often get guests to sort of explain what led them to where they are today. So could you explain a bit of your journey and what has led you to where you are today?
Sure. So I was a journalist. I'm a journalist by trade. And I, during the course of my career, ended up editing lifestyle, style and fashion content. And that ended up going on for about sort of 13 or 14 years. I was editor-in-chief of the Sunday Times Style magazine during a period of time in which we were all being encouraged to shop voraciously. And I was doing the encouraging. So I was kind of responsible for headlines like, the 32 pairs of shoes that you need for this spring and the 7 types of trousers to wear for now and those kind of things. I ended up via a circuitous route as editor-in-chief at Harrods, which is the luxury department store, which was a really, really dreamy job until it wasn't. And that was during the lockdown when I think so many people had a moment to pause and think about what was going on. And I can pinpoint it to a specific day, actually, which was during lockdown. Harrods was closed, as all shops were. And someone who had been kind of in charge of 48 magazines, the e-commerce website, all the in-store video, the social media, every single bit of kind of communications that Harrods had was reduced to cycling across lockdown London, taking pictures of Louis Vuitton handbags and then WhatsApping them to Harrods' ultra high net worth customers, because this is what Harrods had worked out it could still do during lockdown. It could still its ultra high net worth customers were still shopping, which was a kind of galling task. And it was a Thursday. And if you remember, during lockdown, Thursday was Clap for Carers night in the UK.
Yep.
And I had spent the day photographing Louis Vuitton handbags in the dark in Harrods, cycled back through London and grabbed my kids, grabbed the saucepans and the wooden spoons and stood on the doorstep and banged the saucepans. And the sort of juxtaposition of the two things was just very, very stark. And I realized at that point that what I was doing didn't really make any sense and that I needed to learn about it. So I enrolled myself in school and I went to learn about sustainability. And for people that work in sustainability, they say once you know, it's really hard to unknow what you know. Yep. And I realized that I had to kind of pivot everything that I was doing and try and do something to make a change. And I realized that the most effective place for that for me would be in fashion, because that's where all my skill set was and my experience and my network. And also it turned out that fashion was the third most polluting industry on the planet. So I started by setting up a shop, which might sound counterintuitive, but actually what I realized was that if you kind of tell people not to do things, then it doesn't really resonate. Like, people don't like with sustainability when they're told that things have to be less and that you can't do this and you can't do that. And in fact, you can actually inspire people to change if you can show them positive ways and joyful things that they can do. And what I realized was there were an awful lot of brands in the fashion universe that were actually doing really good work. You know, they were working well with their supply chain. They were using, you know, regenerative and biodynamic materials. They were creating product that, you know, was quality and stood the test of time and could stand around for a long, you know, could be around for a long time. And I realized that those were the brands that people needed to kind of know about, rather than the kind of, you know, ultra fast fashion, plastic based clothing that so many of us were buying at that point, and still are. So anyway, the shop became a sort of platform and for championing brands that do good. And so a place where you could shop and buy things that could make you feel good about yourself. And so that launched, and then I started to write about it too. And I started a Substack because I realized that there were so many amazing stories in this space. And I think that's the thing about climate, is that people think it's all about less, but it's not. It's actually about innovation. Like, we are going to innovate our way to a better future. And actually the crazy thing is that we already know the way that we can do that, because all the solutions that we need are actually already out there. Like, the scientists, these brilliant scientists, have already solved the problems. The issue that we have is scaling these solutions and getting them to replace an awful lot of what has been put in place in the last 100 years, largely through the petroleum industries, because they've worked out that they can produce plastics and energy at relatively cheap prices. And so anything that is a new disruptor in that space has to be competitive on price. And that's where the problems lie.
First thing I want to dive into is your school journey, when you decided this isn't for me and I need to pivot. What was that decision like? And also, what have you learned? And what I'm trying to gauge with that is, a lot of the time we see sustainability and being more mindful, a lot of people see it's quite airy-fairy, and sometimes need the reminder of like some of the stark realities. So what was something that you pulled away from your time learning about sustainability?
Well, I mean, the thing that I was very cognizant of was that, you know, we are really on the brink of not collapse. Don't want to sound like a doom monger, but we are about to lose an awful lot. And we are on a very, very tight deadline. And it's, you know, we are living, Charlie, right now in a moment where we can still save those things. But the timeline is very, very tight. And so what is required is action now. And in order for action to happen, people need knowledge, but they also, you know, they need to be able to sort of see how they can do things, you know. So I think that was my big takeaway from that, you know, education system, was actually it's quite urgent.
Do you think, because I think a lot of people that aren't directly involved in the space think that we're past the point of no return and it kind of is what it is, and some people are taking the approach of, we're past it, so there's no point in worrying about it now. Do you, obviously that is very much an uneducated point of view, but what have you seen from the work that you've done? Like, how tight is the timeline? What are we looking at? And I think as well, the conversation of being more mindful when it comes to the environment, it's just a daunting conversation, because there's so much you can change. And for someone that's not in that space, it can feel very like, oh, okay, I've got a complete 180 of everything that I'm doing.
Yeah. No, well, there's two questions there. Let's do the 181 second, because there's lots of things that you could do really quickly and really easily, which would actually just make your life better.
Mm.
But, are we too late? Well, it's like, how muddy do you want to get? We're probably ankle deep in the mud right now, but we can go right in up to our knees. We can wade in over our heads.
Yep.
So it's like, it's a question of at what point do you want to turn back? And you can turn back at any point, depending on how dirty you want to get.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is this limit of 1.5, which we can go into a bit if you want to go there.
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. So 1.5 warming is basically, you've probably heard that phrase bandied around quite a lot. And what it means is that we have to limit global warming to within 1.5 degrees of pre-industrial levels. So we now understand that global warming is happening, and we understand that it is human caused. So the things that we are doing as a human race is causing the planet to heat up. We have given ourselves a threshold of 1.5 degrees C above normal temperatures, normal being what they were 100 years ago, because after 1.5, sort of irreversible damage is triggered. And that's things like ice caps melting and the collapse of biodiversity, ocean currents changing. There are things that will happen that we will never after that get back again. Now, at the end of last year, we did actually exceed 1.5. But the thing is, you can be 1.5, but you can also limit, you can come back down again. So when you hear the UK talking about, we have to get to net zero, that means we might go above 1.5 for the next few years. But if we put everything we need to put in place, we can come back down again. And that is so much better than being 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 and keeping on going. So actually, this is not like, we're past 1.5, we'll forget it. We're all toast anyway, whatever. Let's just listen to the band on the decks of the Titanic. That is not actually the right way to think about it. It's more about, okay, well, we're here now. How can we get back again, basically? So that's 1.5. So I think, when people are talking about lowering their carbon emissions and living a more sort of, conscious lifestyle, it's really about trying to stay within the limits of what our planet can afford. And we are currently consuming resources at 1.7 times what the planet can afford. So simply, we just have to consume less resources or come up with circular models so that things that we consume, we can then recycle and use again. So when you hear people talking about circularity, that's what they're talking about.
What are some quick wins for people that want to be more conscious but don't know where to start? Because as I think it's quite a big thing that everyone goes, I need to do this and I need to do that and I need to do this, and everyone goes, okay, whoa, slow down, don't run before you can walk.
Well, look, I think the two existential crises that we are facing are global warming, so rising temperatures, but also plastic pollution. So there is, plastic is an amazing, incredible substance that was made as a byproduct of oil. And what everyone realized was that plastic, it could be made really cheaply. It could be used in multiple ways, and it was going to solve all sorts of problems for us, mainly because it was indestructible. So everyone was like, great, but then nobody realized quite how much of it we would be making, and the fact that because it was indestructible, where would it go? And the problem is that plastic kind of sheds over time, and you get these things called microplastics, which you can't really see by the naked eye. And these microplastics are everywhere now. They have been found, obviously they're in all the oceans, they've been found in the ice caps, and they are in our bodies as well. They've been found in breast milk, they've been found, they're in your blood, they're in your flesh, you're breathing them in through the air. So microplastics are everywhere, and we don't even know what the health implications of that is. But what we do know is that they are proliferating at a huge rate. And we possibly now have more microplastics than micronutrients in the oceans. So we've got to think about what that means in terms of what's everyone going to feed on. Like fish feeding on plastic isn't a good idea. So a quick fix would be just use less plastic. So when you go to the supermarket, don't buy the fruit and the veg that's in the plastic box. Buy the loose stuff. kind of do refills wherever you can. And I think it's so easy. We consume plastic all the time. And I think just notice how much you're consuming. And when you can choose not to consume it, try not to consume it.
I think that's the thing as well. It's that extra step, which I think is always the biggest barrier. Is everyone doesn't want to do that extra step, but then long term, it's going to have such an impact. It's that I always use the gym analogy. Yeah, you might not see the results today, but further down the line, you're going to eventually see it.
Yeah, and I think it's hard sometimes to think, oh, if I consume this plastic, it's going to end up in the ocean. It seems like a ridiculous thing, doesn't it? But if you kind of think about it in terms of your own personal health, that I think is quite compelling. Like, we don't know what plastic is doing to us. At the same time as the rise in plastic production, we have seen the rise of degenerative disease. So there is all sorts of kind of like cancers and so on has happened at the same time. Are they related? I don't know. And then, things like, well, there are, kind of hormone disruptor situations going on in the world right now, like falling fertility rates, all those kind of things. That's happening at the same time as the rise in plastic. And, there's a lot of correlations. Correlation isn't cause, all that kind of thing. But you have to think about how that might sit with you. And actually, here's a good switch. So I realized that an awful lot of plastic was going into clothing. So anything that isn't a natural clothing, so it's not cotton, it's not wool, it's not linen, it will have plastic in it probably. So it's going to be like polyester or even things like kind of viscose that aren't actually made from oil. There are loads of chemicals that go into them because in order to get the wood pulp to change to viscose, it has to go through a chemical process. So an awful lot of the things that you are putting on your body without even thinking about it are ridden with chemicals or come from oil or plastic. Now, if you think about your sportswear, like when you work out, that's got a lot of lycra in it, hasn't it? Or it's generally a synthetic material because the synthetics companies have kidded you that this is performance fabric. You think that you need this because it will give you better performance. But you're actually working out with plastic next to your skin. Your skin is really sweaty and is exposed, and there's an exchange going on now on your skin. So I started to work out a year ago in like all cotton or all wool. And wool might sound like a really crazy thing to be working out.
Yeah, I was going to say that must be really
but
warm.
wait. The thing is, the technology now has allowed us to kind of weave and spin wool in a way that it is really, really, really light. And actually it's very breathable. Like if you wear an all wool t-shirt, you won't sweat. If you wear a polyester t-shirt, you will sweat.
I have to test that theory.
Yeah, test it. Because, wool grows on sheep, right? It has been designed to trap heat and also to get rid of heat. It's like nature has the best solutions. They are all there. Anyhow, so now I work out in wool and cottons. I put a pair of lycra leggings on the other day and it felt like stepping into a plastic bag. It was so horrible. So actually kind of when you make those switches to like things that you think are better for you and better for the planet, they're also just nicer. They're so much nicer and you don't go back again.
What about, obviously we've spoken a lot about obviously the environmental impact, and one of the things that you've championed and you've created is the Rule of 5 campaign. Can you explain a bit more about that and sort of the interlinkage of those two and what the Rule of 5 is?
Yeah, so fashion had sort of set itself all of these goals about how they were going to get to the 1.5 warming target. And a lot of it was the sort of innovation and recycling and all of these and the new and innovative materials and so on. But there was a climate think tank in Berlin called the Hot or Cool Institute that did a piece of work where it crunched all of the numbers about all of these targets that fashion was setting itself. And it said there's just no way with everything it's doing that fashion is going to hit that 1.5 warming target, because actually the problem with fashion is overproduction. Like we are producing more and more and more clothes and consuming more and more and more of them. And actually, that is the biggest problem. And if we want to hit with the 1.5 warming target, actually, did the maths, it comes down to only 5 new items per person per year. So that is quite a shocking number,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a lot less than most people are used to. But it's also quite a tangible number, because it's not saying you have to stop buying clothes. It's just saying just buy 5 things a year. And you've probably, I mean, Charlie, I don't know your wardrobe, and you're a man. So you're probably better, because men are generally better at this than women. But
No,
most women.
I'm terrible.
Okay, right. So overstuffed wardrobe, right? Full of clothes, like far too many clothes. You don't wear them all.
Yeah.
We only wear like 25 to 30% of our wardrobe. And there's loads of stuff that we already own that we're not wearing. You know, it's probably because it's like needs mending, or, you know, it doesn't fit properly, or you're kind of bored of the style. Well, you can change those things that you've already got into something that you would wear. Like, you can mend them, you can upcycle them, you can alter them. You know, you can turn a pair of trousers that you don't like the shape of anymore. You can change that and make them into a different shape, or make them into a pair of shorts. But, you know, actually using what we've already got. And then also just kind of being really mindful about why we're buying new pieces of clothing. And ultimately, we are being manipulated by a huge sort of digital advertising network, which is funded by everybody trying to kind of grow sales and, you know, grow the bottom line, and facilitated by people like Meta and Instagram and Google, who are basically have worked out how they can target everybody with advertising to incentivize them to buy things that actually they don't really need.
Yeah.
Like, how many times have we regretted purchasing something? So many times.
I think the interesting thing with that is I think there's another massive link with that and like people chasing the dopamine. Because a lot of the time, I'm guilty of this. You'll buy something because you're like, oh, I'd like something new. And it's just that kind of excited Christmas present sort of mentality.
Yeah, you get that's so right. You get, basically, you think, oh, I'm going to treat myself. I'm going to feel good for a short moment. And, you know, and but then the problem is that the aftermath of that is really bad, because you spend money that you don't really want to spend. I mean, this is the other thing. This is a great exercise in saving money, by the way. Let's just think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
But what you can do is, this is what I did when I embarked on the rule of 5 myself, is that you can turn off all of those triggers. So you can unfollow all of those, you know, brands that target you, unsubscribe from all of those emails, block them on your browser, like basically turn off all that stuff. And then you start to move in quite a different universe. And then you have to think about, well, what am I going to replace those little kicks with? What can I do when I feel like I need a treat? You know, and you know, that's down to you as an individual. It could be like a lovely walk outside. It could be a piece of chocolate. It could be like, there are lots of things that you can do when you feel like you need a little treat. And they will be so much better than spending 50 quid on a new t-shirt.
It's so true. And then I think the other thing as well, which is something I was going to come on to, because I know the rule of 5 is very much based around buying quality rather than quantity. But then a lot of people's debate with that will often be, but buying quality is expensive. Buying the cheap, to buying stuff like Temu, you've got Shein, you've got all of those different brands, and it's cheaper. People go, well, I can get more for my money doing this. And then that's the whole debate. What would you say to that? I've certainly, particularly over recent years, realized how much value there is in quality over quantity, but it was definitely a long journey for me to get to.
I know, and nobody wants to deny themselves anything. You know, if you see something that you really want and you haven't quite got, you know, you're not rolling in cash, then you're going to buy the thing that's most affordable, and that's not always the best thing. But, you know, it's like the sort of, you know, the rule about the workman's boots is like, you know, if you buy a pair of boots for $40, they're gonna they're gonna wear out after 6 months, and then you're gonna have to buy another pair of boots for another $40. Whereas if you had $200, you'd buy the pair of boots that would last you for 5 years. So in the end, the rich person ends up saving more money, because the poor person, or the poorer person, has to buy the item that isn't going to last as long. What I would say is there's a really easy out on this, which is to go secondhand. Now, I'm not going to advocate buying lots of secondhand, because there is no sign that the secondhand market is slowing down the primary market. In fact, the evidence is actually that it's facilitating it. So I say on the rule of 5, you're only allowed 4 secondhand. But if you want to buy something that's quality and good, but cheap, you can actually do that. You
Yeah.
just have to buy it secondhand.
I
And
was going to
charity
ask.
full of them.
Yeah, I mean, I even the other day I was in one with my partner. Some of the stuff you can find in there is absolutely crazy. But then I think, as I say, I was going to ask what your views were on brands like Vinted and those sort of. They've seen a massive spike on people using them. But you're right; it just seems like an endless cycle. Like I know so many people that use it as a business. Like I say, they go to the charity shop, they buy something, and then upsell it for a massive profit. It's
Yeah.
so interesting. But I think when we talk about being sustainable, I think you're right. I think there's an element of it's not necessarily helping. It should, in theory, help.
Well, it does if you do it in moderation, you see. So like if you buy 5 new and 4 secondhand ES, that's already 9 things. Then you're ticking every single box on that.
Yeah,
And you could make sure, and if you're only buying 9 things, work out how much money you spent on clothes last year and then
yeah,
divide that by 9. And then you've suddenly got quite a nice budget to go
yeah,
and buy something really special. And what this campaign does, or what this sort of way of shopping does, is it really increases what I call the value relationship between the consumer and the object. And the problem is that we're used to consuming so much, we just don't value these things anymore. They don't have inherent value. We're just kind of addicted to the thrill of buying, if you like, and everything has just become really disposable. But ultimately, that's just not very satisfying. But if you've ever taken a pair of shoes to the menders and had them rehealed and redone, and you're just thrilled when you get them back again, aren't you? You're like, oh my gosh, they're like new. And
yeah.
it's such a thrilling experience. Well, you can do that with everything. You can, like if your dearest, loveliest, friendliest, snuggliest jumper has got holes in the elbows, put some nice leather patches on them. And, suddenly your relationship with that jumper is even deeper than it was before because you've put that care and love and attention into it. And so if you're only buying a handful of things, what you will do is you'll spend a long time researching the thing that you want to buy if you don't buy it spontaneously.
Yeah, I'm a very weird one. I'm sort of halfway between. Normally, research stuff into the nth degree until that dopamine thing comes in, and then it all changes. But on that note, what do you think with the whole thing of mending something and changing it? A lot of people, it's the argument would be convenience. It's that whole thing of then I've got to go find someone to do that, or I've got to teach myself how to do that. Whereas I can go on Amazon, or I can go on here, there, and everywhere and go beep, and it'll arrive tomorrow.
Yes. So again, I go back to the value relationship, Charlie, which is that actually what you want is you want to be the owner of things that you love. You
Yeah.
don't want to be the owner of many, many things that you don't care about. So think about it like that. So, think about the things in your wardrobe that you really treasure. They're generally going to be quality things that have hung around for a while. And
Yeah.
think about, like if I need a new jumper, am I going to get more pleasure out of, buying something cheap and new, or mending the thing that I've already got and really taking care of it and making it like new again?
I think you're completely right. I think it's just that whole, it's that reframing, and I think that does take time.
Yeah, and and that's the thing. Time is the one thing that nobody's got, have they?
No.
We're all time poor, and we haven't got time to go to the menders, and let alone go back and pick it up again. The systems aren't there. Whereas we can open the Amazon app on our phones and click to buy, and it's delivered 12 hours later, and that's just really helpful and easy, and it's very difficult to resist that. But I think you need to think that. So one of the things that I've been thinking about an awful lot recently is about, how do we create change? Like in the world, sometimes it's easy to look around and see all the things that are going wrong and thinking it's out of my reach. There's nothing I can do. I feel quite helpless. And actually, that's not true at all. Like you make several exchanges every day in which you can make a change, whether it's, buying a coffee from your local corner store, choosing to read something. If you choose to read something from a platform which has put care and investigation and fact checking into it, so you've generally had to pay for it, you will get a better reading experience of that. If you buy your coffee from a local independent coffee store than from an international chain, you're going to have a better coffee for a start, but you're also going to
Yeah.
be helping the lives of the people in the community that are immediately around you. So if you think about yourself not as a consumer, and this is the key, but as a citizen, and every time you spend money, you're making a vote. You're voting for that system.
Yep.
So, and 20 times a day, 30 times a day, you will be able to cast your vote, and you will be able to lift up the systems that you believe in, and sort of, disregard the systems that you don't believe in. So, whether you think that Jeff Bezos needs more money, buy it on Amazon. Or if
Yeah.
you think that maybe the person who, lives a couple of miles from you, who's this sort of new craft maker who's doing these really amazing things and is, making beautiful things and making your community really vibrant and wonderful, maybe buy it off them.
Yeah.
And then, you're creating equality in that very simple act. It's quite radical, consumerism. People don't realize they can be really radical with their money.
Yeah. Well, on that note, you mentioned there, obviously, sometimes people can feel like it's out of their control. Do you feel like in your lifetime we're going to get to the point where we need to be? Because this is something that I often end up in a weird scenario with the advocacy work I do around disability. Is my argument is I know for a fact I'm not going to get to where I want to get in my lifetime. It's not going to happen, and I've accepted that, but I'm going to do my best to keep moving it forward.
Yeah, but you are, Charlie, you are setting something in motion. Like everything you are doing is setting something in motion. It may not come to the end of where you need it to be in the time frame that you would like it to, but you will be setting it up for success eventually.
Is that helping the next generation? And I think it's a very much a thing that I constantly back and forth with. Yes, I'd love to see it in my lifetime, but we're not there yet, and it's going to take a lot of time. And I just wondered, on your journey with the advocacy that you do, how do you feel around that area?
Do I think we'll see the end of like oil drilling in my lifetime? No. Would I like to see that? Yes. However, what I will see is, and I'm sure you can see this too, Charlie, is that this is a good thing. Like the old structures are breaking down so that the new structures can rise.
Yeah.
And so you will start to see green shoots of success in the work that you're doing. I mean, in just in the last couple of years, I've seen success in what I'm doing. Like people talk about mushroom leather now. They never used to talk about mushroom leather. People talk about renewable energy. Like, that used to be something that they just talked about in kind of like boardrooms and the Houses of Parliament. Now, we're all switching to, energy platforms that could, give us renewable energy. Like people are doing vegetable boxes to support the farmers. Certainly weren't talking about that like a few years ago.
Yeah, you're completely right.
Like, things are changing. And this is the thing, is that, you have to, it's such an important thing to do. You have to look at how far you've come rather than look ahead at all the things that lie in front of you that you have to overcome. And just when things can feel like it's just not worth it, or you feel miserable, or everything feels terrible, you just need to look back at how far we have come.
I completely agree.
We have better healthcare and education in the world now than ever before, better survival rates, all these things that we never, all we think about is like, we're all going to hell in a handcart because that's the way the algorithm is set up. But there are so many things that are good and are changing and are getting better. And there's mindfulness and consciousness that's going on. And it's really important to focus on those.
Not to be a negative Nelly, but how much of it do you think is structure and infrastructure problem when it comes to being more sustainable? Because one of the debates, not in your sphere directly, but one of the debates is with like electric vehicles. They go, we haven't got the infrastructure to have the charging points and everything else that goes with it. How much of that in your industry do you see being a problem of we just haven't got the infrastructure that we need to make this process better?
No, but we've got a lot more than we did have, and we're going to have more going forward. So, everyone says, EV, there isn't the infrastructure and all that kind of thing. But I can't remember who it was. I think it was BP this week pledged that it was going to, like, all of its new gas stations were going to be EV charging points, like that, it's coming. I mean, one of the things that I learned at sustainability school, which I find really helpful to think about, is that they taught that there are 4 sectors that need to work together to create lasting change. So they are business, finance, consumers, and government. So government needs to give us legislation to incentivize better practices and to finance the infrastructure. Business needs to offer us good solutions so that there are products and services out there that we can buy, which are the ones that we want. Consumers need to have the education and the mindset to be able to buy from those businesses. And then lastly, finance, like all the money people, they need to put their money where the good stuff is and stop financing the bad stuff. And if finance, business, consumer, and government are all aligned, everything happens.
Yeah, it's so true. It's just getting people to buy into it, because it's that whole thing of people go, oh, but that doesn't affect me. It's the same. I have the same debate in my space. It's like, a ramp doesn't affect me. And then you go, so hang on, you've got 2 kids. What about the pushchair? How does that work? Yeah. And it's that realism that I think is always missing, of people going, oh no, yeah, it does affect me, and this is how. And it's one of my biggest frustrations. This isn't just in my space; it's everywhere. You just sit there going, "It's not my problem," and it's not. It's all our problem, because we all want to do better.
But you know what? You and I are both in the business of changing that, because we, with your podcast and all the work that you do, and me with my writing and my speaking and everything, is that it's about changing people's minds and making them see that it does actually affect them, and that if they did make different choices, they would actually feel better and live better as well, and kind of understanding things from a different point of view actually makes you into a much more interesting person.
Yeah, completely get that. It's one of my big frustrations. It's just like, the more information you have, the more understanding you have, the better, more rounded you are. But people are so stuck in their ways. It just, it's so frustrating.
Yeah, and then you have to be really skillful about the way you talk to people about that, don't you? Because it's very hard to talk to someone who's got a very fixed idea about something. But you can talk to people, and you can kind of shine a light on things and challenge them. And, that's the joy about the age that we live in, like this information age, is that you can have conversations with people and reach people in ways that we never used to be able to.
On that note, have you ever had a conversation around the topic of someone that's resistant to the idea, and sort of you've managed to sort of bring them round and develop their understanding to it?
Well, that's a good question, Charlie. I mean, the problem is that you end up speaking quite a lot in rooms where people agree with you, don't you? Because you seek them out, seek you out. I mean, I think there are an awful lot of people in power who I would like to have conversations with about doing things differently.
Yep, me too.
And we can certainly write letters and publish articles and, write to our MP and do all of those things. And we do. And it's important to do that. But I think there are some things which are sort of incontrovertible, if you like. So, for instance, however much of a climate denier you might be, if you walk through a park, you'll get pissed off at all the plastic that you see.
Yeah.
It's just like, actually, you've got to come at it from the point where people are experiencing it. And it may not be that they care about the environment or anything like that, but they probably care if somebody chucks a Mars wrapper in their front garden. Because that Mars wrapper isn't going to go away, is it?
Yeah.
So, so it's things like, you've got to see it, I guess, from the other person's point of view and also, work out what it is that matters to them.
Is that showing them how it relates to their everyday life? Like my biggest one is, or the other one I give is, you're a lot more likely to end up like me than I am like you. So you're more likely to end up in a wheelchair at some point in your life. I'm less likely to have a eureka moment and be like, "Woo, I'm back to full." Then they go, "Oh yeah, that's a really good point." And I'm like, exactly. It's that like sort of oh, I can see it now. I understand it now because I've put it in their context, and they go, oh, yes, yeah, that makes sense. It's that I think when I think of sustainability, I just think it's people get scared of it. They're like, it's like this, like you said, it's that impending doom of like, well, what we're gonna do. It's coming, and I don't know how to stop it because it's almost this. People like hide from it because they don't want to learn about it because they're worried that what they're going to find is going to scare them. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can, it's not about being absolute. It's about little incrementals. There are little things that you can do to build on a slightly better and less impactful life.
And also be kind to yourself. I advocate for that as well. Of like, people make mistakes. You're not going to be bulletproof the whole time,
Mm.
and that's okay. And I think that's another thing. I don't know whether you agree with, of like, make the smaller changes so then they become more easy to manage, and they become more, what's the word, like fluid. That
Yeah.
they just become part of your life rather than this big dramatic moment.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you don't have to suddenly be brilliant. You don't just have to suddenly be different. You can just do little things, and little switches that actually will make your life better. It's not so much that you need to sacrifice anything. You can actually do things that make things better.
And I'm going to quickly ask you two quick last questions. And one is, where can people find, if they want to learn about sustainability, particularly in fashion, where can they look to find information about sustainability within fashion?
Well, I'm going to advocate for my
Of
own
course.
platform. So I'm on Substack, and you can find my on It's Not Sustainable. And also you can find the Rule of Five campaign on Rule of Five, and it's all free to subscribe, and everything there is free. So it's fine. You can look at that. There are lots of places on Instagram that you can look at, like Remake Our World and that kind of things that give you lots of interesting and helpful information. So yeah, that's what I would do. And then I have a book as well called What to Wear and Why, which sets it all out. And actually, you can find that online.
And of course, as we always do, guys, I will link all of Tiffany's stuff below. If you do want to check any of it out, I will link it all below so you can easily find it. And then last but not least is the last question that I ask every guest, which is, what's one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly agree with or disagree with?
Political correctness. Well, this is a hot wire, this one.
Go
But I
on.
think for me, it's going to be the woman debate. So I
Right.
swim in a pond that is a women only pond. And lots of women that swim in that pond like to go naked. And
Right.
they've been swimming naked in that pond for about 30 or 40 years. It's been a big tradition.
Yep.
And in the spirit of welcoming in all women,
Yep.
anyone who identifies as women, which, generosity, that's fine.
Yep.
But what happened was that nakedness then got abused. And then the all women thing had to be rescinded. So I think that would be my area that I feel most conflicted about, which is at what point those women only spaces become women only spaces for those who are born female.
Yeah, it's a very tricky one to navigate because I understand. I mean, I identify as male and male. Like, it's not my area of expertise, but it's one place that I do sit there and I understand both sides, and it's a very tricky place to try and land on something that works for everyone. But it's
Yeah.
also, for me, it's just that whole thing of like understanding the situation. Like, I'm a big believer of like walking into a room and realizing, okay, this is this type of situation and this is how we manage this. So it's all down to what all parties are comfortable with. If that's a situation where an organization's had to look at it differently because it's been abused, it's like everything's great until someone abuses it. Same goes for plastics. Same goes for everything.
Yeah.
It's a really tricky thing to toe the line of. So but I'm completely with you there and completely understand it. But thank you so much for coming on, Tiffanie. It's been a great conversation. And as always, guys, we will link everything below if you do want to get in contact.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Not Quite Podcast. Please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram to get regular updates about the podcast. These